I'm Hope, 28 years old, living in my childhood home in suburban Boston. My accounting career was finally taking off with a recent promotion. Everything seemed normal until that Thursday dinner when my world imploded. "Leave the key and don't come back," my father said coldly. My mother just stared at her plate. "This house was never yours." My sister handed me a suitcase already packed. I had no idea why my family was erasing me until the bank called. Before I tell you my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories about family betrayal and how I reclaimed what was rightfully mine. Growing up, our two-story colonial in Lexington seemed like the perfect middle-class home. White picket fence, neatly trimmed hedges, and my bedroom window overlooking Mrs. Patterson's cherry blossom tree. I spent 16 years in that room, watching seasons change through that window, never suspecting that one day I'd be forced out with nothing but a hastily packed suitcase. My father, Thomas, was an accountant at a mid-sized firm in Boston. He wore the same style of button-down shirts every day, kept his grey-streaked hair perfectly combed, and rarely showed emotion beyond a tight smile when pleased or a furrowed brow when disappointed. My mother, Diana, was a homemaker who focused most of her energy on maintaining appearances, both the house's and her own. She was active in the neighborhood association and local charity events, always careful about the image our family projected. Then there was my younger sister, Abby, 3 years my junior. From the time she was born, she seemed to receive a different kind of attention than I did. Where I received nods of approval for straight A's, Abby got celebrations for passing grades. When I won the state math competition in 10th grade, my parents attended out of obligation. When Abby performed in a school play with 2 lines, they brought flowers and took the family out for dinner. "Your sister needs more encouragement," my mother would say whenever I pointed out the disparity. "You're naturally gifted. Be grateful for that and don't be selfish." The only person who seemed to truly see me was my grandmother Martha, my father's mother. She lived an hour away in a small cottage until her health declined and she moved to a nursing home. During summer visits, she would hold my hand and tell me, "You remind me so much of Joseph," referring to my grandfather who passed away before I was born. Sometimes Grandma Martha would look at me with a strange expression and say cryptic things like, "The truth will come to light someday, Hope. Just stay strong and remember who you are." I never understood what she meant, but her words gave me comfort when I felt like an outsider in my own family. Perhaps that's why I chose to follow my father's footsteps into accounting. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I showed interest in his profession, we might find common ground. I graduated top of my class at Boston University with a degree in accounting and quickly secured a position at Lewiston & Barnes, one of the top firms in the city. Unlike the warmth and praise I craved, family dinners remained tense affairs of picking at food and careful conversation. My father would discuss work in vague terms, my mother would talk about neighborhood gossip, and Abby would dominate, with stories about her friends or complaints about professors now that she was in college. I would share my accomplishments only to have them acknowledged with quick nods before the subject changed. "You should start looking for your own apartment now that you're working," my friends suggested when I complained about the emotional toll of living at home. But every time I mentioned moving out, my parents discouraged it. "Housing in Boston is outrageously expensive," my father would lecture. "The smart financial decision is to live at home and save money. Why would you throw away money on rent when you have a perfectly good room here?" my mother would add. It seemed logical, especially as I watched my college friends struggle with mounting debt and expensive rent. So I stayed contributing to household expenses and building my savings account, unaware that my parents had motives beyond financial wisdom. One evening, about 6 months before everything fell apart, I came home early from work and found my father in his study hurriedly putting away papers as I entered. I caught a glimpse of property documents and bank statements before he closed the drawer. "I didn't hear you come in," he said sharply. "Sorry, I just wanted to ask if you needed anything from the store," I replied. "No, he said curtly. "Please knock next time." I walked away confused by his reaction. It was the first crack in what I would later discover was a massive deception constructed over decades. The first real fracture in our family facade appeared when I received a promotion at Lewiston & Barnes. After 2 years of 60-hour weeks and proving myself on challenging clients, I was promoted to senior accountant with a substantial raise. I was ecstatic and couldn't wait to share the news with my family. I stopped by the liquor store on the way home and purchased an expensive bottle of champagne. I also picked up small gifts, a silk tie for my father, a scented candle set for my mother, and concert tickets for Abby. I planned to announce my promotion over dinner and celebrate together as a family. That evening, I arranged my gifts on the dining room table and helped my mother prepare a roast chicken, my father's favorite. When everyone was seated, I couldn't contain my excitement any longer. "I have some news," I said, smiling broadly. "I got promoted to senior accountant today. It comes with a 20% raise and my own office." I waited for congratulations, for someone to reach for the champagne for any sign of pride. Instead, my father nodded and said, "That's nice. The salad needs more dressing, Diana." My mother murmured, "That's good, dear." Before passing the salad bowl, Abby rolled her eyes slightly and said, "I got invited to join the Honours Society at school," effectively redirecting the conversation to herself. I watched in disbelief as my parents perked up asking Abby questions about the Honours Society and what it meant for her future. My promotion was forgotten, the gifts and champagne untouched. I excused myself to the bathroom and fought back tears of disappointment. When I returned, I overheard my parents in a heated whisper in the kitchen. "We need to talk about this sooner rather than later," my father said tensely. "She doesn't need to know everything right now," my mother responded. "The bank said we have until—" "I know what the bank said," my father cut her off. "But she's working at an accounting firm now. What if she starts asking questions? What if she finds out the truth before we're ready?" "She won't," my mother insisted. "She never questions anything. Besides, what does she deserve after everything we've done for her?" Their voices dropped even lower, and I couldn't hear the rest. I crept back to the dining room, my heart pounding. What truth? What were they hiding from me? In the weeks that followed, strange things began happening around the house. I'd come home to find doors locked that were normally open. Conversations would abruptly stop when I entered a room. One Saturday, I discovered my childhood photos and mementos had been moved from the hall closet to boxes in the attic. "We're just organizing," my mother explained dismissively. The closet was cluttered. I also noticed my sister having hushed phone conversations, ending calls abruptly when I walked by. Once I saw her getting into a car with a man I recognized as Mr. Blackwell, our family attorney. When I asked her about it later, she claimed she was getting advice about student loans. My anxiety grew as the atmosphere at home became increasingly tense. I tried addressing it one evening at dinner. "Is everything okay? Everyone seems on edge lately," I ventured. "Everything's fine," my father said flatly. "You're imagining things." "No, I'm not," I insisted. "You and Mum are whispering all the time Abby's being secretive and half my stuff has been moved to the attic." "You're being paranoid," my mother said. "Maybe you're working too hard at your new position. Maybe you should focus on your own life instead of inventing problems," Abby added with unusual hostility. I felt crazy, like I was seeing signs that no one else acknowledged. The gaslighting continued until I began doubting my own perceptions. Then one afternoon, while everyone was out, I was searching for a spare light bulb in my father's study when I found a stack of bank statements addressed to my grandmother. Curious, I scanned them quickly and noticed large transfers to my parents' account over several years. The most recent statement showed a warning about unauthorized access attempts and mentioned something about a trust violation. I wanted to ask my grandmother about it, but her health had been declining rapidly. The last time I visited her at Sunshine Meadows nursing home, she barely recognized me, her mind slipping in and out of clarity. I planned to visit her again that weekend, but I never got the chance. By Thursday night, everything would change forever. The day of the betrayal dinner started like any other. I left for work at 7:30, grabbing a granola bar for breakfast and calling goodbye to my mother, who was watering plants in the sunroom. I had no idea it would be my last normal morning in that house. It was mid-October, and the air had the crisp scent of autumn. Red and gold leaves crunched under my boots as I walked to my car. I remember thinking it was a beautiful day, the kind that made me appreciate New England, despite the harsh winters. Work went well. I finalized a complex tax strategy for a corporate client and received praise from one of the partners. I texted my mother around 4 to say I'd be home for dinner, and she responded with an unusual message. "Your father wants everyone home by 6. He has something important to discuss." I wondered if it had to do with the retirement he occasionally mentioned, or perhaps a family vacation. Maybe they'd finally acknowledge my promotion. I stopped at a bakery and picked up a chocolate cake, my father's favorite, thinking it might soften whatever serious discussion awaited. When I arrived home at 5:50, all 3 family members were already seated in the dining room. The table was set formally with our best dishes, which we typically only used for holidays or special occasions. My mother had prepared pot roast with potatoes and carrots, another of my father's favourites. Perfect timing, my father said without smiling. Let's eat while the food is hot. Dinner was unnervingly quiet. My attempts at small talk were met with one-word responses. No one commented on the cake I'd brought, which sat untouched on the kitchen counter. After we finished eating, my father cleared his throat. Let's move to the living room. I have something important to discuss with Hope. My stomach tightened. The formal tone, the special dinner, the solemn atmosphere, something significant was happening. In the living room, my parents sat together on the sofa while Abby took the armchair, leaving me standing awkwardly in the centre of the room. No one invited me to sit. My father's face was expressionless as he said the words that would haunt me for months. Hope, we need you to leave the house. Tonight. I thought I'd misheard him. Leave, you mean like, for the evening? No, he said coldly. Permanently. We need you to leave the key and not come back. The room started spinning slightly. What? Why? What did I do? This isn't working anymore, my mother said, staring at a point above my head rather than meeting my eyes. We think it's best for everyone if you move out immediately. But why now, without any warning? My voice rose with panic. At least give me time to find an apartment. That's not our problem, my father said. We've supported you long enough. Abby stood up and left the room without a word. When she returned, she was pulling a medium-sized suitcase behind her. I packed some of your things, Ameda Afasan, she said, avoiding my eyes. The essentials. I stared at the suitcase in disbelief. This wasn't a spontaneous decision they had planned, this discussed it, prepared for it. While I was at work earning a living, my sister had been packing my belongings. This house was never yours. My father continued, his voice flat. You should be grateful we let you stay as long as we did. What are you talking about? I cried, tears forming. I grew up here. This is my home too, and I've been paying you rent for 2 years. That barely covered your expenses, my mother scoffed. What expenses? I buy my own food, pay for my phone, my car, everything. I was shouting now, desperate to understand what was happening. We don't owe you explanations, well, my father said, standing up. We've made our decision. You need to leave now. Listen. What about the rest of my things? I asked, looking at the single suitcase that couldn't possibly contain all my belongings. We donated most of it, Abby said. Your room has been cleared out. That was when the full reality hit me. They hadn't just decided this today, they'd been planning it for weeks. The secret conversations, the moving of my mementos, the locked doors. They had been systematically erasing me from the house. Why are you doing this? I sobbed, my legs weakening beneath me. Please, just tell me what I did wrong. I'll fix it. There's nothing to fix, my father said. This is just how it has to be. Did something happen? Is it money? Are you in trouble? I pleaded, trying to make sense of the senseless. Stop asking questions, my mother snapped. Just take your things and go. I looked at each of their faces, searching for any sign of the family I thought I knew. My father's stern expression, my mother's averted gaze, my sister's tight lips. These strangers wearing my family's faces showed no compassion, no love, nothing but cold determination. Rain had started falling outside, matching the storm inside me. I grabbed my purse and the pathetic suitcase, still wearing my work clothes and heels. At least tell me where I'm supposed to go, I said, my voice breaking. That's not our concern anymore, my father replied. As I stepped outside into the rain, my father called after me, Don't forget to leave your house key. With shaking hands, I removed the key from my keyring and placed it on the small table by the door. As I walked to my car, I heard the deadbolt slide into place behind me. That night, I discovered they had already changed the security system code when I realized I'd left my laptop charger inside. No one answered my knocks or calls. I spent the night in my car, 2 blocks away, too shocked and disoriented to think clearly about where to go. In less than an hour, I had gone from a daughter to a stranger from family to homeless, with no explanation and no warning. It was the cruelest betrayal imaginable, and I had no idea it was only the beginning of the truth I would uncover. The first 48 hours after being thrown out were a blur of disbelief and practical panic. I spent that first night in my car, curled up in the back seat with my coat as a blanket, waking every hour from nightmares where I was falling through darkness while my family watched impassively. At dawn, I drove to a cafe and used their bathroom to splash water on my face and change into clothes from the suitcase. Looking through what Abby had packed, I found mostly casual clothes, one pair of work slacks, 3 tops, basic toiletries, and oddly my high school yearbooks. No photos, no keepsakes, none of the jewelry I'd inherited from my grandmother. Just the bare minimum to say they hadn't sent me away with nothing. I called Jessica, a co-worker I'd become friendly with over lunch breaks. When I explained what happened, leaving out details I didn't understand myself, she immediately offered her couch until I figured things out. "You can stay as long as you need," Jessica assured me when I arrived at her 1-bedroom apartment in Cambridge. "My cousin got evicted last year and crashed with me for 2 months. At least you have a job." I tried calling my parents' house repeatedly, but no one answered. I sent emails, text messages, even a handwritten letter delivered to their mailbox. Nothing. It was as if I had ceased to exist in their world. The only response came 3 days after I was thrown out a text from Abby. "Stop contacting us. We're not family anymore. Move on with your life and leave us alone." Those words cut deeper than anything. What did she mean, not family anymore? How does family simply stop being family? Jessica's kindness was my lifeline during those early days. She loaned me work clothes, helped me set up a bank account at a different bank than my parents used, and most importantly, listened without judgment as I cycled through confusion, rage, and grief. "Have you thought about going to the police?" she asked one evening as we shared takeout Thai food. "And say what? My parents kicked me out of their house. I'm 28, not 16. It's not illegal to ask an adult child to move out," I replied. "But something feels off about how they did it," Jessica pressed. The suddenness, the secrecy beforehand, not explaining anything. Normal parents don't do that. She was right, of course, but I couldn't imagine filing a police report against my own family, especially when I couldn't articulate what crime they'd committed beyond emotional cruelty. A week after being thrown out, I had my first panic attack. I was at work reviewing a client's tax forms when suddenly I couldn't breathe. My heart raced. My vision tunneled and I was certain I was dying. A colleague called an ambulance, but by the time it arrived, the symptoms had subsided enough for me to decline transport to the hospital. The company's HR representative recommended I see a therapist, which the health insurance would cover. I started weekly sessions with Dr. Madison, who diagnosed me with acute stress disorder and possible depression. "What you're experiencing is a form of grief," she explained. "You've lost your family, your home, and your sense of security all at once, without warning or explanation. It's a profound trauma. Sleep became elusive. I would lie awake on Jessica's couch until 3 or 4 in the morning, replaying every interaction with my family over the past year, searching for clues I might have missed. When I did sleep, nightmares jolted me awake, sweating and disoriented. My work performance suffered. I made careless errors, missed deadlines, and struggled to focus during meetings. My boss, Michael, called me into his office after I mixed up 2 clients' files. "Hope you've always been one of our most reliable team members," he said kindly. "But lately you seemed distracted. Is everything all right?" The unexpected compassion broke through my carefully maintained professional facade. I told him a simplified version of what had happened. "I'm temporarily homeless, and my family has cut off all contact without explanation." I summarized, fighting back tears. "I'm trying to find an apartment I can afford, but in the meantime I'm sleeping on a friend's couch." Michael looked genuinely shocked. "Take some time off," he offered immediately. 2 weeks paid. "Sort out your living situation, take care of yourself. Your job will be here when you get back." His kindness was almost harder to bear than my family's cruelty. I wasn't used to people putting my needs first. With time off work, I decided to visit my grandmother at Sunshine Meadows nursing home. Despite her declining health, she might be the only person who could explain what was happening. Even in her confused state, Grandma Martha had always seen me clearly. When I arrived at the nursing home, the receptionist gave me a strange look when I signed in. "Martha Miller," she confirmed, checking her computer. "I'm sorry, but Mrs. Miller passed away 2 weeks ago." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. "What? No, that can't be right. No one told me. According to our records, the family was notified," she said, looking uncomfortable. "The funeral was held last Thursday at Oakwood Cemetery." Last Thursday, the very day my parents threw me out. They hadn't even told me my grandmother had died. They denied me the chance to say goodbye to attend her funeral. It was a cruelty beyond comprehension. I must have looked as devastated as I felt, because the receptionist called over a nurse named Eleanor, who had cared for my grandmother. "Your hope," Eleanor asked gently, leading me to a quiet corner of the visitors' lounge. "Martha talked about you constantly. She was so proud of you. Was she asking for me? At the end, I could barely form the question. Eleanor's expression told me everything. She asked for you every day. Your parents told us you were too busy with work to visit. She didn't believe them. The betrayal cut deeper. They had lied to my dying grandmother, keeping us apart during her final days. Before she passed, Eleanor continued, lowering her voice. She asked me to give something to you if you came. I wasn't supposed to, but she reached into her pocket and withdrew a sealed envelope. She made me promise. With trembling hands, I took the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my grandmother's shaky handwriting. Check Meridian National Bank account, number 7241JM. You'll find your truth. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better. All my love, Grandma Martha. A bank account I'd never heard of. A truth I didn't understand. But it was the first real clue to the mystery of my family's betrayal, and despite my grief over my grandmother's death, I felt a flutter of something like hope. The next day, gathering all my courage, I walked into Meridian National Bank, clutching my grandmother's note like a lifeline, ready to uncover whatever truth awaited me. Meridian National Bank was housed in a stately stone building in downtown Boston, the kind of place that exuded old money and discretion. I felt underdressed in my borrowed blazer and slightly wrinkled slacks, but I straightened my shoulders and approached the information desk with as much confidence as I could muster. "I'd like to speak with someone about an account, please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you have your account number and identification?" the receptionist asked. I showed her my grandmother's note and my driver's license. The account holder was my grandmother. She recently passed away and she left me this note. The receptionist examined the note, then made a phone call. After a brief conversation, she directed me to the elevator. "Mr. Wilson will see you on the 3rd floor. He handles trust accounts and estates." Trust accounts, estates. My confusion deepened as I rode the elevator up. Harold Wilson was a silver-haired man in his 60s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office was wood-panelled with leather chairs and smelled faintly of pipe tobacco. "Miss Miller, please have a seat," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I understand you're inquiring about account 7241JM. "Yes," I replied, handing him my grandmother's note. "My grandmother left me this before she died. I don't know what it means." Mr. Wilson studied the note, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between surprise and concern. "May I see your identification again, please, Galway?" he asked. I handed over my driver's license, and he compared it to information on his computer screen. "Well," he said finally, leaning back in his chair, "this is somewhat irregular, but given the circumstances, Miss Miller, according to our records, you are the rightful owner of the property at 147 Maple Street in Lexington. That's your family's home, correct?" The world tilted sideways. "What? No, that's my parents' house. They own it." Mr. Wilson shook his head slowly. "No, Miss Miller. The house is held in a trust established by your grandfather Joseph Miller before you were born. Your parents were never the owners. They were trustees, only caretakers of the property until you reached the age of 30. Dang. My mind raced to process this information. But that's 2 years from now. I'm 28. Correct. The terms of the trust stipulated that your parents could live in the house rent-free while raising you and continue living there as trustees until you turned 30, at which point full ownership would transfer to you. He shuffled through papers on his desk. However, there were conditions they were required to meet as trustees. What conditions? I asked, still struggling to comprehend what I was hearing. They were required to maintain the property, pay the taxes from a fund established for that purpose, and most importantly, they could not borrow against the property or attempt to sell it. His expression grew grave. Unfortunately, it appears they violated several of these conditions. He turned his computer monitor so I could see the screen which displayed account statements and property records. This trust doesn't just include the house, Mr. Wilson continued. Your grandfather established a significant investment portfolio as well, meant to provide for your education and future. As trustees, your parents had limited access to these funds for specific purposes related to your upbringing and education. My throat went dry as pieces started falling into place. Did they take money they weren't supposed to? Mr. Wilson nodded solemnly. Over the past 10 years, we've documented numerous unauthorized withdrawals. They forged signatures on documents to access investment accounts. They attempted to take out a second mortgage on the property, which was flagged by our system. When questioned, they claimed the funds were for your college education, but our records show you received scholarships that covered most of your tuition. I thought about the luxury car my father bought 5 years ago, the expensive renovations to their master bathroom, my mother's designer wardrobe, the lavish vacations they took with Abby during college breaks, while I stayed home to work summer jobs. How much did they take? I whispered. Approximately $875,000, Mr. Wilson replied quietly. The amount was staggering, nearly $1 million stolen from me without my knowledge. Last month, our audit department discovered additional irregularities, he continued. As per the trust agreement, we sent formal notification to your parents that we were beginning the process of transferring the property to you as you are approaching the age specified in the trust. We also informed them that due to their violations of the trust terms, they would be required to vacate the property and could potentially face legal consequences for the misappropriated funds. Bang! Suddenly, everything made horrible sense. The secret conversations, the strange behavior, my sister meeting with the family lawyer. They knew they were about to lose the house, my house, and be exposed for their theft. They kicked me out the day after my grandmother's funeral, I said numbly. They emptied my room, changed the locks, and told me the house was never mine. Mr. Wilson's expression softened with sympathy. I'm very sorry, Miss Miller. What they did was not only cruel, but potentially criminal. Fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty are serious offences. Did my grandmother know about this? I asked, thinking of her cryptic note. Martha Miller was a co-trustee until her health declined 5 years ago, he explained. She stepped down and your father became sole trustee. I believe she suspected something wasn't right, but may not have known the extent of it. She came to see me about 6 months ago asking about the trust status. She seemed concerned. What happens now? I asked, overwhelmed by the revelations. As the rightful beneficiary, you have several options, Mr. Wilson said, shifting into professional mode. We can initiate legal proceedings against your parents for the misappropriated funds. You can take immediate possession of the property, it is legally yours, and the remaining trust assets, approximately $1.2 million in investments, and cash will transfer to your control when you turn 30 or immediately if you choose to dissolve the trust. $1.2 million, plus the house. All this time, while I pinched pennies and lived frugally believing I was building my future from scratch, I had been wealthy without knowing it. I'll need to think about this, I said, my head spinning. Of course, Mr. Wilson replied. In the meantime, I've prepared copies of all relevant documents for you to review, and I would strongly recommend consulting with an attorney who specializes in estate law and financial fraud. As I left the bank with a thick folder of documents under my arm, I felt as though I had stepped into someone else's life. The betrayal was so much deeper, so much more calculated than I could have imagined. My parents hadn't just rejected me, they had stolen from me for years and thrown me out to hide their crimes. The truth was finally emerging, but instead of bringing clarity, it only deepened the mystery of who my family really was and who I was now that everything I believed about my life had been shattered. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of legal consultations, document reviews, and emotional reckonings. With Mr. Wilson's recommendation, I met with Sarah Jenkins, an attorney specializing in estate law and financial fraud. This is one of the most egregious breaches of fiduciary duty I've seen, Sarah said, after reviewing the trust documents and bank records. Her office was modern and bright, a stark contrast to the dark thoughts swirling through my mind. What are my options? I asked, feeling simultaneously powerful and overwhelmed. Legally, you have several, Sarah explained, counting them off on her fingers. 1, you can press criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. 2, you can file a civil suit to recover the misappropriated funds. 3, you can evict them from the property immediately. Or 4, some combination of these actions. What would happen if I pressed criminal charges? The thought of my parents in handcuffs was both satisfying and disturbing. They could face significant prison time, especially your father as the primary trustee, Sarah said matter-of-factly. The amounts involved make this grand larceny, and the fact that it occurred over many years shows premeditation. I thought about what prison would mean for my father, a man in his 60s, who valued his reputation above all else. For my mother, who would be humiliated in front of her social circle. For Abby, who would have to face the reality of our parents' crimes. What if I just want the house and some of the money back? I asked. That's certainly an option. Sarah nodded. We could approach them with the evidence and offer a settlement, they vacate the property within a specific time frame and repay a portion of the funds in exchange for you not pursuing criminal charges. We spent hours developing a strategy. Sarah prepared legal documents while I wrestled with my conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted revenge, wanted them to suffer as I had suffered. Another part still couldn't reconcile the parents who had raised me with the people who could commit such calculated theft and betrayal. After 7 days of preparation, Sarah and I decided it was time for a confrontation. We arranged for a police escort not to arrest my parents, but to ensure the situation remained peaceful. I was genuinely unsure how they would react when cornered. The morning of the confrontation, I dressed carefully in a charcoal grey suit, professional, authoritative, armoured against their manipulation. Sarah drove us to Lexington in her BMW following the police cruiser. As we pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, my home, according to the law, I saw the curtains twitch. Someone had seen us arrive. Officer Reynolds approached the front door first with Sarah and me hanging back slightly. He knocked firmly. My father answered, his face draining of colour when he saw the police officer, then me standing behind him with an attorney. "Thomas Miller," Officer Reynolds asked. "We're here to facilitate a property discussion. May we come in?" "What is this about?" my father demanded, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "I think you know exactly what it's about," I said, stepping forward with the trust documents in hand. "Meridian National Bank sends their regards." "Sorry." He flinched visibly, then reluctantly stepped aside to let us enter. In the living room, my mother and Abby were huddled together on the sofa, both looking terrified. "Hope, what is the meaning of this?" my mother demanded, attempting to maintain her dignity. "I'd like to introduce Sarah Jenkins, my attorney," I replied calmly. "She's here to discuss the Miller family trust, the house that rightfully belongs to me, and the $875,000 you stole from me." My mother gasped. My father's face hardened. "We don't know what you're talking about," he said flatly. Sarah stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the coffee table. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, we have extensive documentation of unauthorized withdrawals, forged signatures, and attempts to mortgage property you did not own. The evidence is quite compelling. You had no right to throw me out of my house," I added, emphasizing the word my with all the hurt and anger I'd carried for weeks. "You had no right to steal my money. You had no right to keep my grandmother's death from me, or prevent me from attending her funeral." Abby started crying, but I felt nothing for her tears. She had been complicit, had helped pack my suitcase, had told me we weren't family anymore. My father's defense crumbled quickly in the face of the overwhelming evidence. "We deserved that money after raising you all these years," he said bitterly. "Do you have any idea how expensive it is to raise a child? The sacrifices we made were sacrifices." I laughed incredulously. "You lived in a beautiful home for free. The trust paid the property taxes. There was money designated specifically for my education and upbringing. And you still stole more. What sacrifices exactly did you make?" My mother broke down then, sobbing dramatically. "It was all Thomas's idea," she cried. "He said we needed the money for investments. I didn't know it was wrong." "Stop lying, Diana," my father snapped. "You spent as much of it as I did. On your jewelry, your spa treatments, your shopping trips." They turned on each other like cornered animals, exposing years of secrets and resentments, forgetting I was even in the room. Abby suddenly stood up, pointing an accusing finger at me. "This is all your fault. You're destroying our family. How can you do this to us?" "I'm destroying the family," I repeated in disbelief. "You packed my suitcase. You helped them throw me out without explanation. You told me we weren't family anymore. They said I could have your room and your car if I helped," she admitted, then immediately looked horrified at her own confession. Officer Reynolds, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I should inform you that what you've done constitutes several serious crimes. Miss Miller and her attorney are being extremely reasonable in offering you an opportunity to resolve this without immediate arrest." The word arrest seemed to finally penetrate their self-righteous bubble. "What do you want?" My father asked me, defeat evident in his posture. "I want you out of my house within 48 hours, I said firmly. "I want a full accounting of every dollar taken from the trust. I want all of my personal belongings that weren't donated returned immediately. And I want the truth about why you did this." Sarah outlined the formal terms they would vacate the property sign, a repayment agreement for a portion of the stolen funds, and in exchange I would not press criminal charges provided they complied fully with all conditions. You have 48 hours, I repeated, standing up to leave. Officer Reynolds will return then to ensure you've vacated the premises. As we walked toward the door, my mother called out in a small voice, Hope, where are we supposed to go? I turned back, meeting her eyes directly. That's not my concern anymore. 2 days later, I watched from across the street as my parents and sister loaded their belongings into a moving truck. Officer Reynolds supervised while Sarah conducted a final walkthrough of the house documenting its condition. When they were finally gone, I entered my home, truly mine now, for the first time since being thrown out. The house felt hollow, haunted by memories both good and bad. Room by room, I discovered more betrayals. They had taken expensive fixtures, antique furniture that had belonged to my grandparents, and anything else of value they could quickly remove. The safe in my father's study was empty. Even the copper pipes in the basement had been hastily cut out, causing water damage. That night, I slept in the guest room, unable to face either my stripped childhood bedroom or the master bedroom my parents had occupied. Alone in the big house, I felt neither triumph nor peace, only a profound emptiness. The next morning, while examining my grandmother's old room, which had been converted to storage, I discovered a dusty shoebox tucked into the back of the closet. Inside was a flash drive labeled simply For Hope. With trembling hands, I plugged it into my laptop. A video file appeared my grandmother recorded about a year before her death, looking frailer than I remembered, but with clear eyes and a determined expression. My dearest Hope, she began, and I burst into tears at the sound of her voice. If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and the truth has finally found its way to you. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you everything while I was alive. I was afraid of what your father might do if he knew I was planning to reveal his deception. For the next 20 minutes, my grandmother explained everything. How my grandfather had set up the trust because he'd never trusted my father's financial judgment. How my parents had resented the trust restrictions from the beginning. How they had systematically siphoned money while maintaining the appearance of middle-class normalcy. You were always meant to know about your inheritance when you turned 25, Grandma Martha explained. But your father convinced the bank that it would be too disruptive to your career development. I fought him, but by then my health was failing and he had control. Her face grew sad. I fear they may do something drastic when the bank finally forces them to relinquish control. Stay strong, Hope. Remember that none of this is your fault. You deserved so much better than what they gave you. The video ended with her smiling gently. I love you, my sweet girl. The house is yours, the money is yours, but most importantly, your life is yours. Live it well. I watched the video 3 times crying until no more tears would come. Then I finally fell asleep on the guest room bed, emotionally exhausted, but with a strange sense of peace beginning to form around the jagged edges of my pain. 1 year after being thrown out of my own home, I stood in the renovated kitchen, arranging appetizers on a serving tray. The house looked nothing like it had when my parents lived here. Gone were the heavy drapes, the formal furniture, the stilted family photos that had always made me uncomfortable. In their place were bright, airy curtains, comfortable modern furnishings, and walls adorned with art I'd chosen myself. The dark wood paneling in the study had been painted a soothing sage green. My childhood bedroom was now a home office where I occasionally worked remotely. The master bedroom, after a complete renovation to erase any trace of my parents, had become my sanctuary. The doorbell rang and I smiled, knowing my first guests had arrived for the housewarming party, or rather what I was calling my new beginning celebration. Jessica stood on the porch holding a potted plant. Officially, your first visitor in the newly renovated house, she announced proudly, not counting the contractors who've been here daily for 6 months. I laughed, hugging her. It looks amazing, she said, looking around appreciatively as she entered. I can't believe it's the same place. It isn't, I replied. Not really. Over the next hour, the house filled with people who had supported me through the darkest period of my life. Michael from work and his wife, Dr. Madison, my therapist, whom I'd invited not as a professional, but as someone who had witnessed my healing journey. Sarah Jenkins, whose legal expertise had protected me from my parents' attempts to challenge the trust after they realized I wasn't pressing criminal charges. Eleanor, from the nursing home, who had given me my grandmother's note. And there was Daniel the contractor, who had overseen the renovations. What had started as a professional relationship had slowly evolved into friendship and then over shared lunches and paint samples and discussions about lighting fixtures into something more. He arrived last, apologizing for the delay. Client emergency, he explained, kissing my cheek. But I brought wine to make up for it. As we gathered around the dining table, a new one I had chosen myself, I looked at these people who had become my chosen family. I want to thank you all for being here, I said, raising my glass. A year ago, I thought I had lost everything. My family, my home, my sense of security, it all vanished overnight. I paused, feeling the emotion of the moment, but no longer overwhelmed by it. What I didn't realize then was that I was about to find my true home, not just this house, but a life that belongs completely to me. I discovered that family isn't defined by blood or legal documents. It's defined by who stands beside you when you're broken, who celebrates with you when you begin to heal, who helps you rebuild what was destroyed. Jessica wiped away a tear. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. As for my parents and sister, I continued, I've made peace with their absence. The repayment plan is in place, and they're meeting their obligations. I don't hate them anymore. I actually feel sorry for them. They threw away authentic relationships for money and material things. They lost far more than I ever did. What I didn't mention was that 2 months earlier, I had established the Martha S. Miller Foundation using a portion of my inheritance to help young adults who had been abandoned or betrayed by family. The foundation provided emergency housing, legal assistance, and therapy, all the things I had needed in those first desperate weeks. So today isn't really a housewarming, I concluded. It's a celebration of finding my way home to myself and to all of you who helped make that possible. We ate and laughed and shared stories late into the evening. When everyone had gone except Daniel, who was helping with the cleanup, I found myself standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where I had once played as a child. Penny, for your thoughts, Daniel asked, coming to stand beside me. I was just thinking about ownership, I replied. For so long I thought this house belonged to my parents. Then I discovered it was legally mine all along. But now I understand that real ownership isn't about property deeds or trust documents. What is it about then? He asked. It's about claiming your own story, I said slowly. About deciding what matters to you, who matters to you, how you want to live your life. My parents thought they owned me, that they could control my story, erase me when it suited them, but they were wrong. I go. Daniel nodded, his eyes warm with understanding. This house is mine now, truly mine, not because of legal documents, but because I've filled it with my choices, my vision, my truth. I continued, and my life is finally mine too. Later that night, after Daniel had gone home with plans to return for breakfast, I sat on the window seat in my bedroom looking up at the stars. I thought about the girl I had been a year ago, homeless, heartbroken, betrayed, and the woman I had become. The bank had called me owner, but the journey had taught me that I was the owner of something far more valuable than property or money. I owned my choices, my boundaries, my ability to trust again, despite betrayal, my capacity to build something beautiful from the ashes of what was destroyed. I thought of my grandmother's last words to me in that video. Your life is yours, live it well. And that's exactly what I intended to do. If you've ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. How did you rebuild your life afterward? What helped you heal? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of overcoming family betrayal and finding strength in unexpected places. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in whatever challenges you're facing in your own life.